What is up, folks? Kenji back with the Ixalan limited set review, Black. If you guys haven't checked out the previous set reviews, I've done white and blue. You can go check those out on YouTube or Numot Gaming, wherever you're watching. But let's start off with Black. Anointed Deacon. Black and 4 for a 3/3 Vampire Cleric. At the beginning of your combat on your turn, you may have target Vampire get +2/+0 until end of turn. Kind of like a Mortis Dogs, but better with Vampire synergies. This is probably going to be like a 2.5 out of 5. Bishop of the Bloodstained, 2 black, 3 for a 3/3 Vampire Cleric. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 1 life for each vampire you control. I think this is going to be quite good in the tribal deck. Frequently you'll be able to burn your opponent out, say for even like 5+ damage if you've really got a nice board state. But I imagine this doing more like 2 or 3 damage. This is probably a 2.5 out of 5. Blight Keeper is a black for a 1/1 flyer, and this is one of those 8 mana cycle cards. You can pay 8, sacrifice it, target opponent loses 4 life, and you gain 4 life. I think this one is surprisingly decent. As a 1/1 flyer, it's going to be annoying super early in the game, and then late game you can just, soul feast an opponent out for 4. So I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5, which, it doesn't seem very good, but for a 1 mana 1/1, it's about as good as you're going to get. Blood-Crazed Paladin, black and 1 for a 1/1 flash vampire. When it enters the battlefield, or rather, it enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it for each creature that died this turn. This is another really nice one. It is a rare, so you're not going to see it frequently, but wouldn't be surprised if this is just like a 2 mana 3/3 flash. Obviously, you're going to have to do it after combat, where most creatures are going to trade. But if you have any number of removal spells that you can use prior, then you can kind of ambush something on attacks. I'm going to give this a 2.5 out of 5. Boneyard Parlay is 2 black and 5 for a mythic sorcery. Exile up to 5 target creature cards from the graveyards. An opponent separates those into 2 piles. So you kind of get like that fact or fiction for returning creatures from graveyards. And remember, this is from both graveyards, so I think this is going to be really solid as you put them under your control. This is probably close to a 3.5. You're going to have 7 mana late game. There are going to be a ton of creatures in the graveyard. You're generally going to get 2 or 3 creatures out of the deal. So I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. Contract Killing, 2 black and 3. Destroy target creature, create 2 treasure tokens. Just solid removal spell that you can gain some value off of. This is an easy 2.5 out of 5. Costly Plunder, black and 1. Sacrifice an artifact or a creature as an additional cost, and you draw 2 cards. Kind of like the Altar's Reap. I'm sure this is going to be pretty sweet as you can sacrifice an artifact, so treasure tokens are something that you can help pay the cost with. Just a decent black card, 2 out of 5. Dark Nourishment, black and 4. Deals 3 damage to target creature or player. You gain 3 life. This is an instant. It's uncommon. It's solid removal plus some life gain. Very, very easily splashable. 3 out of 5. Deadeye Tormentor, black and 2 for a 2/2. Human Pirate, raid. Target opponent discards a card. So if raid's activated, your opponent discards a card. Otherwise, standalone, it's a 3 mana 2/2, which is not great. And the raid's not even that impressive anyways. You had like Marduk's Skull Hunter back in the older format, which is a 2 mana, do the same thing. So this is probably like a 2 out of 5 at tops. Deadeye Tractor, on the other hand, is a black for a 1/1. Exile 2 cards from an opponent's graveyard, and it explores. I think this card is really sweet. Obviously, the stats are quite small to start things off, but the incremental value that you'll just get as a game progresses, if they don't deal with this card, is huge. 3 out of 5. Deathless Ancient, 2 black, 4, 4/4 flyer, tap 3 untapped vampires you control, return it from your graveyard to your hand. 6 mana 4/4 flyer is pretty average in limited. The ability to bring this back from your graveyard, though, is quite nice if you have the vampire synergies. I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. Desperate Castaways, black and 1 for a 2/3. Can't attack unless you control an artifact. So depending on how easily you can get the artifacts or treasures in this format is really going to change the way that the Desperate Castaways is valued. It's probably a 2 out of 5 standalone. Direfleet Hoarder, black and 1 for a 2/1. When it dies, you get a treasure token, so just good value on a 2/1 body for 2. Give it a 2 out of 5. Direfleet Interloper, black and 3 for a 2/2 menace. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. So it's either going to be a 3/3 menace for 4, or it's going to be a 2/2 menace that draws you a land for 4. Plus, you get that scry. So I'm going to give this a 2.5 out of 5. Direfleet Ravager, 5 mana, 4/4, Menace Death Touch. This is a mythic orc pirate wizard. When it enters the battlefield, each player loses a third of his or her life, rounded up. Just a solid creature overall. I mean, it's not like super bomby, but it's just very, very good. Give it a 3.5 out of 5. Duress Reprint. I'm actually a big fan of this in Limited as well, as you can frequently take some annoying removal spell or a good late game card advantage engine, something like that. Frequently, you're not going to want to start all of these, and maybe not even the first, but I'm still going to give it a 2 out of 5. Fathom Fleet Captain is a black and 1 for a 2/1 menace. When it attacks, if you control another non-token pirate, you may pay 2. If you do, create a 2/2 black creature with menace. This is a great one. It's hard to block by itself since it has menace, and if you play it on turn 2, your opponent's most likely not going to have 2 creatures to block it with. And then if you get some more pirates later in the game and you can back it up with some removal, you just get a huge army of menace creatures. This is a 3 out of 5. Fathom Fleet Cutthroat. Ugh, I can't say that fast. Black and 3 for a 3/3. Enters the battlefield. Destroy target creature that an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. So Hill Giant with huge upside. You know, you can mash in your weenies into your opponent's bigger creature and then kill it after the fact in combat. This is a 2.5 out of 5. Grim Captain's Call, black and 2. Return a pirate card from your graveyard to your hand. Then do the same for Vampire, Dinosaur, and Merfolk. Kind of weird. This could be like a super, Grave-dig effect. Depending on how your deck's crafted, this could return up to, 4 cards, which would be absurd. But probably standalone, you're looking at a 1.5 or a 2 out of 5. Heartless Pillage, black and 2. Target opponent discards 2 cards. And then Raid, you also get a treasure token. So, Mind Rots, I always like them in sealed especially, but they're even fine in draft. It's a good rate, and if you have the raid ability, then you get some added upside. I think this is like a 2, maybe even a 2.5 out of 5. Kite Sail Freebooter, black and 1 for a 1/2 flyer. Enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land, so it's a Duress. It's a Duress on a stick until this leaves the battlefield. It's okay, not amazing. It does have flying, so a little bit of evasion and the pirate synergies, but overall not great. Probably a 2, maybe a 2.5 out of 5. Lurking Chupacabra, black and 3 for a 2/3 beast horror. Whenever a creature you control explores, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So this is one of those swingy cards, as 4 mana for a 2/3 is not great, but if you have a large amount of explore in your deck, you can just get a ton of value out of this card. In the right explore deck, I can see this being like a 3.5 out of 5. March of the Drowned, black. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or return 2 pirate cards from your graveyard to your hand. It's probably going to be okay. You're not going to want to run more than 1, I'd say. Give it a 2 out of 5. Mark of the Vampire, black and 3. We've seen this before. This is a reprint. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has lifelink. This is also a pretty swingy effect in addition to, like the Spectral Flight reprint. It has super high upside, but you do have that blowout potential. I'm going to say a 2.5 out of 5. Queen's Agent, black and 5 for a 3/3 lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. So you either have 6 mana for a 4/4 lifelinker, or you have 6 mana for a 3/3 lifelinker that puts a land into your hand. You still do get that pseudo scry effect though, and lifelink is always super annoying in Limited. I'm going to give this a 2.5 out of 5. Queen's Base Soldier, just a vanilla 2 mana 2/2 vampire soldier, 1.5 out of 5. Raider's Wake, black and 3. Whenever opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. This is an enchantment. Raid, if you attack the creature this turn, target opponent discards a card. I like this card. Because you can attack on turn 4 after playing a 3-drop and then play the Raider's Wake and get some value there, but I just don't think it's going to be good in a longer game or in most situations. It's fringe. It's probably 1.5 out of 5. Revel in Riches, black and 4. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you get a treasure token. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. This is kind of like a black market type effect if you think about it, as, you know, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you're just going to get an artifact and a ramp. I don't think you're ever going to play it for the treasure win con, but you can just get it for the kind of extra value. So if you have a treasure-themed deck, this could be a thing, but overall, I wouldn't recommend trying this out. Give it a 1.5 out of 5. Ruin Raider, black and 2 for a 3/2 Orc Pirate. Raid, at the beginning of your end step, if you attack the creature this turn, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. You lose life equal to card's converted mana cost. So it's a Dark Confidant if you have Raid enabled. It's a 3/2 for 3, but it's also a rare. It's a very good card. It's probably a 3 out of 5. It's just you're not going to see it very frequently. Ruthless Knave, black and 2 for a 3/2. You can play a black and 2, sacrifice a creature, and create 2 treasure tokens. And then you can sacrifice 3 treasure tokens to draw a card. So you can save a creature if it's being targeted by a removal spell and get 2 tokens. You can save a creature if it's being blocked by a larger creature, anything like that. 3 mana for a 3/2 is already fine filler stats anyways. I think this card is really solid. 3 out of 5. Sanctum Seeker, 2 black, 2 for a 3/4 Vampire Knight. Whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is a really solid card. Even just as a 4 mana 3/4, that's perfectly fine in limited. And then the upside of the vampire synergies is obviously there. It triggers itself because it just says whenever a vampire. So if it attacks, you're already going to gain 1 life and your opponent's going to lose 1 life. This is a 3, maybe even a 3.5 if you have the vampire deck out of 5. Seeker Squire, black and 1 for a 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. So 2 mana for a 2/3, above average in limited for a 2-drop anyways. Or 2 mana for a 1/2 that draws you a card. Pretty solid in my books. I'm going to give it 2 out of 5. Maybe even a 2.5. Let's give it a 2.5 out of 5. Skittering Heartstopper, black for a 1/2 insect. You can pay a black to give it Death Touch until end of turn. I'm always a fan of these type of cards. Obviously, it's a little bit awkward that you have to leave up a black to give it Death Touch every time, but this creature will just trade up almost always, or they, aim a removal spell at it. I'm going to give it 2.5 out of 5. Skullduggery, black for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature you control gets +1/+1, and target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1. We've seen this effect before, although it cost 2 mana in the previous set. I can't remember the name of it now, but I like this as a combat trick. It can be really swingy. It has the potential to be a 2-for-1 if played correctly and there are mass blocks or something like that. But as far as combat tricks go, it's cheap, it's efficient. Give it a 2.5 out of 5. Skymarch Bloodletter, black and 2 for a 2/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it's a Windrake with added upside of you drain the opponent for 1 when it enters, and it's also a vampire. I'm going to give this a 2.5 out of 5. Spreading Rot, black 4. Destroy target land, its controller loses 2 life. Filler junk. 0.5, maybe 1 out of 5. You can sideboard this in if they have one of those transform lands, but otherwise leave it in the sideboard. Swordpoint Diplomacy, black and 2. Sorcery. Reveal the top 3 cards of your library. For each of those cards, put that card into your hand unless any opponent pays 3 life, then exile the rest. It has the potential to draw you, a few cards or some amount of life loss for your opponent, but these type of cards where you give the opponent options generally aren't considered very good. Think of it as like a browbeat effect. It's also rare, so you're not going to see it that frequently. I'm going to give it a 1.5 out of 5. Vanquish the Weak, black and 2. Instant, destroy target creature with power 3 or greater. 3 or less. Destroy target creature with power 3 or less. Just very solid removal spell in black. You're going to happily play most, if not all of these that you get in draft or in sealed. This is an easy 3 out of 5. Vicious Conquistador, black for a 1/2 vampire soldier. Whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 1 life. We saw the Pulse Tracker from Zendikar block. This is basically the same thing, but with an added toughness and the vampire synergies. I don't think it's going to be great, but if you have a dedicated vampire deck, then this could be a thing potentially. I'm going to give it a wavering 2 out of 5. It's more filler than anything else. Vraska's Contempt, 2 black and 2. Instant, exile target creature or planeswalker, you gain 2 life. Just very solid removal spell. Doesn't get much better than this. It is a rare, so you're not going to see it often. But the only thing putting this back from being, 3.5 or a 4 is the fact that it's double black in the casting cost. Just solid. You're always going to play it in your black decks. 3 out of 5. Walk the Plank, 2 black for a sorcery, destroy target non-merfolk creature. Yeah, and similarly, this is like a 3 out of 5, just like Vraska's Contempt. It's just solid, it's cheap, it's efficient. You're not going to get much better than Walk the Plank. Wanted Scoundrels, 1 black and 1 for a 4/3. When it dies, target opponent gets 2 treasure tokens. So, high upside of a 2-mana 4/3, high downside of giving your opponent 2 treasure tokens when it dies. If you're able to back this up with removal and just beat them down super early, yeah, this is great. And sometimes your opponent can't really utilize the treasures all that well anyways, but I would be wary about playing this against an opponent with a lot of removal, even Walk the Plank. And that actually concludes the black set review as far as limited is concerned. If you guys enjoyed, don't forget to follow, or rather subscribe here on this channel. You can check out all the other content on my YouTube page. I stream every day at twitch.com/NumotTheNummy. Twitch.tv/NumotTheNummy. Jeez, I don't even know the website that I stream on every day. And of course, check out all the other content here on Numot Gaming. I will bring you guys the rest of the set review in the following days. We've gone through white, we've gone through blue, and now we've gone through black. Next up, we have red, green, and then multicolor /lands and artifacts. Thanks for watching.